Do business, act business. Business
The Nigerian economy needs to be anchored on the lifeblood which the MSME industry is about. This is an industry that can guarantee employment and, of course, definitely address our GDP outlook. Welcome to Business Matters. My name is Stephen Ipalabo Lawson.
Business Matters. Let's talk business.
The statistics of business failures in this country is one that is alarming. From the point of registration to the point of taxation, most businesses do not endure because obviously a lot of people have argued that the environment is very, very coarse to businesses. And this is some of the things that need to be addressed in order for us to have a thriving economy. Let's have our business update.
Hey beautiful, your eyes, your smile are all begging me to take you home tonight. Now reading page 3. Experience unlimited super-fast internet access from Entel 4G.
Entel. Live more.
It's our culture on Business Matters to invite a distinguished individual who certainly is very knowledgeable in his given field. And today, joining me in the studio to explore the topic, MSME, the past year and the outlook for 2022, is no other person than the founder of MSME Africa, a multifaceted resource platform for micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. He is the convener of the MSME Dialogue, an event for discussing, of course, providing solutions to issues that affect MSMEs and their operators. He emerged the winner of the Entrepreneur Africa Prize for Media Innovation in 2021. As a matter of fact, he's an international partner with the World Business Angel Investment Forum and a member of the MSME Community of Practice of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. He's a man who is a mentor and certainly has been one that a lot of us have come to appreciate because of his passion. He's a mentor with the Tony ELUMELU Foundation Entrepreneurship Program, the CHERIE Foundation Women in Business Program, as well as Faith Foundation Entrepreneurship Program, which also includes the Leap Africa Social Innovators Program. As a matter of fact, he's a man who is very passionate of learning and definitely one who basically places a premium on human capacity development. Please join me as a welcome Mr. SEYE OLUROTIMI. Mr. SEYE OLUROTIMI, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much for having me at the studio today.
Great. Now, let's go straight into the discourse. 2021 was a very tough year, as a matter of fact.
Sure.
What would you say was the overview like, especially how it's affected the MSME industry?
Okay, so maybe I should just talk about the industry briefly before I talk about the overview. I mean, talking about what happened last year. So,
Great.
like you rightly said, MSMEs are like the bloodstream of any economy. And then in Nigeria, we have about 45 million of them. Because
45 million?
MSMEs. Because as of 2017, according to a survey by Smedan and National Bureau of Statistics, we have 41.5 million. We had 41.5 million. That's 2017. So give and take, we should have like 45 million MSMEs in Nigeria today in a population of about 200 million people. So we have a lot of people within that bracket. Then not just that alone.
Is that a good figure?
It is. It is.
Okay.
It is.
I mean, if you just oppose that with our population, 45 million MSMEs are enough to actually help the economy.
It is. I think the only challenge is that as much as we are growing in numbers, are we growing in depth? Are we growing in capacity? Maybe that's another question for another time, but that's a major thing we also need to talk about. Not just growing in numbers. Yeah, the figures are showing that we're actually growing. And the interesting is that a lot of women are actually also coming to the entrepreneur ecosystem right now. So that's what is happening. And so apart from that, MSMEs contribute 50% to the GDP and are responsible for about 80% of employment in the country as at today. So that sector is actually a major player and is the lifeblood of the economy, like everyone rightly acknowledges now. We didn't have that acknowledgement before. Now let's look at 2021. It was a mix of the good and the bad. We had a lot of access to...
Not necessarily ugly?
Well, we had some ugly scenarios too, like the forex, inflation, and some other things. Well, let me start with the good, right? So let's talk about what happened in the digital space, which was a major blessing, and I think we can still ride on it in 2022. Now the digital space seems to be so opened up now that people can access a lot of things. So the man in Zamfara doesn't have to travel down to Lagos or to Abuja to access some training and some capacity development programs anymore. Now, because right now everybody that is doing training, that is doing capacity development, is opening it up to the digital space. That is a norm now, things we are not used to. So we can even access a lot of services, a lot of things in the digital world. So that's a blessing that came with 2020, COVID, 2021, and of course I believe in 2020 it's going to get a lot bigger. We also had a lot of investment, especially in the tech ecosystem. So there is no week, in fact, there is no day you don't get to hear about news of funding, especially for the guys in the fintech sector, the ed tech, and some other guys. So we have a lot of funding coming into that space, right? But of course, we can always argue that the startups are not your traditional MSMEs, but of course, they still play in that sector. So digital space is opened up. We have a lot of inflow into the tech ecosystem, which is also very good. But of course, when you talk about the bad ones, we want to look at what is happening in the economy. We've been grappling with inflation for a long time, and I mean, as of yesterday, I saw the figure. I think it's still about 16%.
That's quite high.
That is nothing to be happy about. Then, of course, the unemployment rate, sometimes last year, rose up to as much as 3.3%. So for every 3 Nigerians, 1 is not employed. And that's just unemployment. We're not even talking about underemployment. So in an economy where you have inflation, you have unemployment, I think we begin to talk about stagflation and what some of the things that economists talk about. Yeah. Then, of course, we had the forex problem.
True.
For an import-dependent economy like ours, and then we have this forex, it's a problem. And because most of the MSMEs, a lot of them still even have to import what they use for their manufacturing and some other things from other countries. And so they have to buy at a higher rate. That, of course, increases their cost. And, of course, they pass it on to the consumer. So that's a major challenge, inflation, unemployment.
Now, Cherie, one of the things you mentioned has to be with ACTA. I mean,
Yes.
there's been the pros and cons, argument for and against. The debate is obviously ongoing, where people believe that we will not be able to leverage on our comparative advantage, given that we are operating in a very harsh business environment, especially with the fact of manufacturing. For me to be able to export, so to speak, some of the products that I've manufactured here in Nigeria, I have to be able to have very wonderful, good access to power.
Exactly.
So do you think that ACTA, as a matter of fact, is not going to put us in the disadvantage by the time it kicks off fully?
Yeah, that has been my worry too, but I like to be optimistic. I'm hoping that government would help us ease off some of those things that could cause problems for us. Because like you rightly said, by the time I'm manufacturing here and the cost of power, the cost of some other things is shooting up my price, I will not be able to compete with other people. So if I say I want to import what I'm producing in Nigeria, let's say at the unit price it gets to Gambia is, let's say, $5. And if they can get it relatively for $4 in their economy, within their country, why should they patronize me? So I need to be very, very competitive with my pricing. And how can I be competitive when my costs are shooting up? So that's a major problem, and I want to hope that the government would help us, because a lot of these things are what government should help us with, right? Power problem, infrastructure problem, so that we can actually be competitive. I mean, we have the population, we have the might and everything. We should be able to use it to our advantage when it comes to trading within the region.
True. Now, you mentioned earlier on about depth, not so much more on the volume of the population or the numbers of entrepreneurs. And you tried making a distinguished characteristic between a startup and the regular MSME, as the case might be. So would you imagine that mentorship might be an inroad to help us drive a very deep capacity, especially for for the value chain of the sector?
Definitely, mentorship is almost is something we cannot joke with. And when you look at these startups, right, who seem to be getting a lot of things right now. I compare startups with MSMEs, right? They are not your traditional MSMEs. But being a startup, if you are still doing a particular figure, right, you can still be classified as an MSME.
What figure is that? If
you're doing between 1 million and 1 billion in Nigeria today, you are classified as an MSME. If your turnover, yes, if your turnover is between 1 million, or let's say even from 0 to 1 billion, you are an MSME. So if you're doing between 1 and 25 million, you are a micro. If you're doing between 25 million and 100, you are a small business. And if you are doing between 100 million and 1 billion, you are a medium enterprise.
As a matter of fact, it seems like a lot of people are micro, other than
that's
macro.
It. So when you tell people you are an MSME, they feel like it's derogatory. But are you doing up to 1 billion? As at the latest classification, if you are not doing up to 1 billion, you are still within the MSME bracket. So it's not derogatory.
As a matter of fact, you're even still within the micro and small. You've not even got it into the medium.
Exactly. So even according to that survey in 2017, 41.5 million MSMEs, right? But 41.4 are in the micro sector. So we have a lot of people in the micro, in the informal sector. The regular guy on the street who sells fish, who sells this and that. They actually make up the larger chunk of the whole thing.
All right, Shay, we're going to go on a short break. This is getting interesting. There are 2 or 3 questions I need us to explore before we call it a day on the program. And viewers, like you've seen, we're looking at MSME, the past year in view, as well as what should we be looking at in terms of outlook for 2022. And joining me in the studio is Mr. SEYE OLUROTIMI. We're going to be back after this short break.
Experience unlimited superfast internet access from Entel 4G.
Entel. Live more.
Well, if you just joined us, this is Business Matters, and I've been discussing with Mr. SEYE OLUROTIMI, and we'll be looking at MSME, the year in view, and an outlook for 2022. One of the things that oftentimes amazes me is that sometimes we imagine that the government or the people in government don't seem to, they seem to exist in a parallel universe, especially with the quest for taxation. And you realize that a lot of MSMEs are supposed to be enjoying tax, holidays or tax, whatever you want to call it. Do you think the taxation campaign is not going to kill more businesses than even empower?
Okay, so let's look at this in 2 ways. So according to the Finance Act 2020, if you're doing less than 25 billion, you're exempted from some level of taxes. You don't need to charge VAT, you're not expected to collect VAT for government, and then you don't pay company income tax. But apart from that, it looks like what we're gaining from one side is coming again through the back door, right? So right now, if you want to do a Facebook advert, which almost every micro and small business does, you'll have to pay VAT for doing an advert on Facebook. If you have a Zoom account, you'll have to pay VAT for subscription, right? So some taxes are also coming like through the back door, so to say. So if you're accessing some benefit now that you were not taxed for before, you'll have to pay taxes for them. So that's a major problem. I read something sometimes ago. I think we have about 46 or 53 number of taxes in Nigeria, and that seems to be like the highest. So my major problem is that we're not saying we shouldn't pay tax. I mean, how would the country run? But let it be clear. Let there be no ambiguity. Let me be able to do it with all the convenience. But it seems like a lot is shrouded in secrecy, and it's not clear, such that you have to end up going and say, please, just help me. And then you end up with touts, right? You end up paying more than you should actually have paid, because the things is not just clear. I'm saying these guys are micro, small, and medium enterprises. Let there be a way for them to be able to pay their taxes with a lot of convenience, and let it be something they can actually pay without looking like it's a pain in their neck.
I guess that's why we've been classified as a third world country and the world poverty capital.
Well, we're not the only third world country. Yeah, Nigeria is sadly we are the poverty capital of the world. Took over.
Yeah,
from
but Kenya is doing better. I know even Ghana's business environment is improving. Unfortunately, they seem to be clamping down on Nigerian businesses in Ghana, which is quite a sad happening. We also know that Rwanda, as a matter of fact, especially in the fintech e-payment banking space, is actually doing well in that regard. So I think it's high time for us to be able to have this conversation to see exactly how we can build an inclusive society that is hankering on integrity, on truth and trust. Because without trust, you can't do any business, as a matter of fact. That's what even the credit system is, as a matter of fact, anchored on.
So I quite agree with you. The trust has to be there. The people have to trust the government, and that will not come automatically. You need to behave in a certain way for me to be able to trust you. So government needs to all over again earn the trust of the people. Because anytime government comes up with a policy, in the mind of an average entrepreneur, an average Nigerian, you think they are just out there to take an advantage of me. So I'm happy, for instance, that we have the startup bill being discussed. I want to hope that with the startup bill that we are discussing, we would actually be able to undo a lot of these issues. Because the general argument is that the government doesn't seem to understand the startup ecosystem, right? But right now, they are talking with them. They are saying, we want to listen to you. We are working on a bill that will cater to that industry, to that sector. So I'm really, really hopeful that with the startup bill, a lot of issues will be addressed. And of course, with what is happening in the office of the vice president, what's happening in the Ministry of Trade, and some other parastatals and government agencies that are working with MSME, I want to believe that things will get a lot better in 2022.
A lot of people don't think Nigerian banking or financial system is very friendly to the MSMEs. As a matter of fact, most people believe that most banks in this country actually are not into banking. They are obviously the way it operates in other climes. And so the interest rate for loans, for example, have obviously been seen as killers. Certainly the access to funds and then grants, so to speak, which I believe is one of the areas that people like you are quite vast in. Could you give us some highlight of what exactly is going on and where the opportunities lie?
The banking industry is expected to actually service the real sector of the economy. But in Nigeria, it seems that that sector that is meant to service the real sector is actually doing a lot better. So when you see the interest and the profit being declared by the bank compared to the manufacturing industry, compared to the FMCGs, compared to the micro and medium enterprises, right? You want to say what's happening. So they are
so
actually
that's not to say the bank shouldn't make profit.
They should make profit, but
it's scandalous.
You're meant to support the real sector. So if those guys are struggling with funding, there's a problem. So there's a report by PwC 2020 survey that says that the MSMEs have a funding gap of 617 billion naira. That's a funding gap right now, annually. And the interesting thing is that 617 billion wasn't up to 3%, 3% of the total credit given out by the banks. So this is it. So it's either the banks are not giving loans to these guys, or these guys are not meeting their conditions. So if the MSMEs that need the money are not getting, that means you're actually lending to some other big corporates. And from experience, those guys are more likely to become bad debtors. That's why a lot of loans become properties at the end of the day. So lend to these small guys who don't have the gut to want to run away with your money. Yeah, some of them, of course, default. But when you have so much money and you are giving the larger chunk to these big corporates and the big guys and they default and there's nothing you can do, they become serial debtors. Why these young guys who are contributing 50% to the economy are struggling? Just 617 billion, that's the funding gap that we keep looking for every single year. That's a problem. When it comes to funding, every MSME thinks that their major problem actually is funding. But I say it is not. So a lot of people come and say, if I get 1,000 naira for every time people ask me about funding, right? I'll be worth trillions of naira right now, because everybody keeps saying the funding is a problem. But I say, before you get funding, get capacity. And that's when you see these startup guys. A lot of them get their funding from accelerators, from angel investors, from venture capital. But most of these venture capital, they make them go through accelerators where they actually get mentored, right? Where these people actually teach them how to run businesses before they give them the funding. And they don't even leave them. So you are forever yoked with them, right? So they even want to have representation on your board. They want to hold your hands where you run the business. So you keep learning. As much as you're getting funding, you keep learning. But the traditional MSME guy just wants to get money. They don't want to know how to run the business.
They don't want any supervisory role or whatever it is.
They also don't want that way. Yeah, and they also want to hold on to 100% of their business. You don't know that these guys that you hear that they keep getting funding every day, they are selling some part of their business to the investors, right?
But I think it has to do with trust and control.
So
everybody says hold on to 51%. Is that wise? It depends on the volume of
at least if you have 51%, you have controlling share. Okay. But the question is, will I rather have 100% of a business that is worth 5 million naira, or I want to have 5% of a business that's worth 10 trillion naira? That's what we don't know. If you hold on to it, you will remain small, right? But when you invite venture capitalists and angel investors, they invest in your business. You get several rounds of funding. The business gets bigger. You're able to scale, because the major thing about the startup space is they scale, right? They create solutions that can actually scale, and that's why they start with MVP, minimum viable product. Then after that, they can now scale the product and reach more people, even beyond their country, of course, with the backings of the venture capitalists and angel investors. So we need to start thinking like that as traditional MSMEs. Let's not be small in our thinking. But I would always advise, when you start looking for funding, start with what you can get from family and friends, from your personal savings. Start by bootstrapping. Don't start a business and you want to go look for a bank loan. That might be your undoing if you're not careful, right? So when you start with that, at some point you know when you're due for a bank loan, when you're due for some other form of investment. Another kind of funding that we don't even talk about so much is grants. MSMEs can get grants, but they just need to know how to apply for this grant. The common scenario is that you see that somebody wins a grant and it becomes a serial winner. I can tell you, I know a couple of people that they've been winning grants, they've been winning all these challenges and competition for MSME, because there is a science to it. But a lot of people don't learn it, so they just apply with the same old method and they don't get it. But some people are very good at applying for grants and they keep getting it, right? And that's when you get a grant, you are not expected to pay back. You are not ceding any equity to anybody. It's just free money.
Now, the grants actually are for not social enterprises, but even commercial engagements. Okay.
Yeah, of course, it's a lot more for social entrepreneurs. But even when you're doing a viable, as much as you can prove that your business can benefit the society, and they can see your traction, what you've been doing before, right? And they know that if you give this guy this money, it will actually scale what he's doing, and they can tie it to some form of good in the society, they would give you the grant. A lot of them here and there.
All right, Sheye, I think we're going to have to find a way of bringing you back on this program to explore this particular area more, because you have actually opened an opportunity that a lot of our viewers will be much more interested in. And I'm very sure that you will oblige us when next we invite you.
Definitely, I will.
Thank you very much. This is so much we can have as the case might be. And one more time, thank you, Sheye.
Thank you very much for having me.
Viewers, unfortunately, time is never our friend on this program, and we want to say a big thank you for joining us. We're going to go on a short break. As soon as we're back, we're going to call it a day. As you've seen, the MSME industry is the key to ensuring Nigeria gets out of the poverty net. However, there are opportunities that we have to leverage on. But without capacity, you obviously will not be able to sustain a business successfully. This is so much we can bring to you on this week's edition of our program. Please follow us on all our different social media handles, as well as our website to have more details of our different programmings. My name is Stephen Ipalobo Lawson. Until I come your way again, bye-bye for now.
Business